Bom, boa tarde a todos. Eu me chamo Guilherme, sou mestrando no programa de pós-graduação em História da Universidade Federal de São Paulo. Vou ajudar hoje na coordenação dessa mesa, porque o coordenador que estava atribuído a ela, infelizmente, está tendo alguns problemas de saúde. Então, a gente deseja ao professor Renato, enfim, tudo de bom e uma rápida recuperação. I'm trying to speak now in English. I am Guilherme Velte. I'm a master student at the Federal University of São Paulo. The coordinator of this session is having some health issues, so I'll try to replace him, but I have to say that my English is not perfect, not the best one, so I try to do my best. I'm gonna call now the first speaker, and he's gonna present in Portuguese, so I'm talking to him in Portuguese. Bom, vou chamar agora o primeiro participante, o Ives Leocelso Silva Costa. Só um minuto. O Ives é mestre pela Universidade Federal de Sergipe e vai apresentar sobre a rebelião de Andrônico I Comneno, 1182, segundo Guilherme de Tiro. Ives, você pode começar assim que você quiser.
Boa tarde, Guilherme. Boa tarde a todos os participantes. Boa tarde a todos que estão acompanhando a gente pelo YouTube. Eu vou iniciar agora o compartilhamento dos slides.
Ives, se você puder falar um pouquinho mais alto, que está muito baixo.
Tá melhor agora?
Sim, está melhor. Muito obrigado.
Eu vou iniciar agora o compartilhamento de tela. Aí você me fala se aparecer. Foi?
Sim, você pode deixar em tela cheia.
Ok, pronto. Tá todo mundo vendo aí, não é? Então vamos lá. Boa tarde a todos mais uma vez. Eu sou Ives Leocelso Silva Costa, sou mestre em História pela Universidade Federal de Sergipe. E hoje eu venho com vocês com a comunicação intitulada A Rebelião de Andrônico I Comneno, 1182, segundo Guilherme de Tiro. Guilherme de Tiro é considerado um dos maiores cronistas das Cruzadas, especialmente no que concerne aos estados latinos do Oriente. Nascido no Reino de Jerusalém, Guilherme envolveu-se profundamente na política do Outremer, tendo alcançado as posições de chanceler de Jerusalém e arcebispo de Tiro. Sua trajetória conduziu a diversas embaixadas em Constantinopla, onde teve a oportunidade de tratar com a aristocracia bizantina e com os latinos residentes naquela metrópole. Assim sendo, os acontecimentos do Império Bizantino figuram em diversos momentos na história hierosolimitana, escrita pelo cronista entre 1170 e 1184. Nesta comunicação, examinaremos a abordagem de Guilherme de Tiro à rebelião liderada por Andrônico I Comneno, em 1182, evento que se tornou conhecido por ter ocasionado um massacre à população latina da capital.
Ives, perdão, licença, ainda continua muito baixo. Você pode tentar aproximar um pouquinho mais do microfone?
Eu estou com o microfone
Perdão.
bem próximo. Eu vou tentar falar mais alto.
Agora ficou melhor. Acho que se você segurar o microfone fica melhor, tá bom?
Tá certo. Eu vou falar mais alto para garantir.
Tá bom,
Melhorou?
obrigado.
Me avise se eu começar a gritar. Continuando. Nesta comunicação, examinaremos a abordagem de Guilherme de Tiro à rebelião liderada por Andrônico I Comneno em 1182, evento que se tornou conhecido por ter ocasionado um massacre à população latina da capital. A partir desta narrativa, analisaremos a percepção dos latinos acerca dos gregos e as relações entre estes grupos na segunda metade do século XII. Para os fins desta análise, utilizaremos a tradução da história para a língua inglesa, efetuada por Emily Walter Babcock e A.C. Cray em 1943. As citações em português serão, por sua vez, traduções nossas. Então, principiando, eu abro a comunicação com uma fala de Guilherme de Tiro a respeito do reinado de Manuel Comneno. Manuel Comneno governou entre 1118 e 1180, e ele é chamado por Jonathan Harris de o amigo dos latinos. Durante o reinado de Manuel, amado por Deus, os latinos haviam corrido em grande favor com ele, uma recompensa bem merecida devido à sua lealdade e coragem. O imperador, um homem magnânimo de incomparável energia, confiava tão implicitamente em sua lealdade e habilidade que desconsiderava os gregos como moles e efeminados e incumbia negócios importantes somente aos latinos. Então, essa frase de Guilherme de Tiro, ela de imediato coloca em oposição a população latina que vivia em Constantinopla com a população grega daquela mesma cidade, e coloca que o reinado de Manuel Comneno foi um reinado de proeminência dos latinos, que receberam grande favor, recompensados por sua coragem e lealdade e ocupando cargos de confiança. Esse contexto do governo de Manuel Comneno, ele apresenta um avanço nas relações com os estados latinos de Oriente, com os reinos formados a partir da Primeira Cruzada, o reino de Jerusalém, o Principado de Antioquia e os demais condados. Nesse contexto, Manuel Comneno rompeu com as ações de seus antecessores, ele procurou estabelecer relações positivas com esses reinos cruzados, ele procurou se estabelecer como uma espécie de patrono do combate contra o infiel, uma espécie de líder do movimento cruzado. Ele organizou incursões contra o Egito, aliado com exércitos do Oriente Latino. Ele promoveu, até certo ponto, a cultura cavaleiresca em sua corte. Ele chegou a organizar torneios que não eram praticados em Bizâncio, em Constantinopla, causando um certo estranhamento da população grega. E, durante o seu reino, ele também procurou criar laços mais duradouros com os reinos do Ocidente. Ele se casou primeiro com Berta de Schusbach, que era de origem germânica, e posteriormente com Maria de Antioquia, do Principado de Antioquia, que era uma princesa de origem normanda. Então, durante seu governo, ele foi visto como uma espécie de promotor dos latinos, de defensor dos latinos. Contudo, o que Jonathan Harris, em sua obra Bizâncio e as Cruzadas, traz é que tudo o que ele fez procurando promover as estratégias bizantinas na região. Ele tinha interesses bizantinos na Península Itálica, tinha interesses bizantinos nos Balcãs, tinha interesses bizantinos, claro, no Oriente, no Egito, e ele tentava, através da sua diplomacia bastante hábil, e principalmente procurando não confrontar os cruzados, mas se expressar de forma a conquistá-los, utilizar de fórmulas, de dispositivos diplomáticos que fizessem com que ele percebesse como um parceiro, um protetor, quase como que um suzerano, apesar de não impor um governo direto, mas tudo dentro das estratégias de controle bizantino do Mediterrâneo. E nesse contexto, é importante ressaltar também que os latinos não formavam uma unidade. Os venezianos, por exemplo, tiveram vários momentos conturbados durante o governo de Manuel Comneno. Em 1171 chegaram a ser expulsos porque alguns elementos de Veneza atearam fogo e saquearam o distrito onde moravam os pisanos, da cidade de Pisa, e em decorrência disso o imperador determinou que diversos venezianos fossem apreendidos e expulsos. Então as relações com Veneza haviam se deteriorado na última década de seu reino. Por outro lado, quando ele promoveu pisanos, amalfitanos, genoveses, tanto nos distritos da cidade quanto no comércio e em cargos de governo, ele também desejava impedir ou refrear a independência e a interferência veneziana, que era muito forte. Mas Guilherme de Tiro, percebendo Manuel Comneno como um aliado da causa cruzada, da causa dos latinos do Oriente, só escreve sobre ele praticamente em bons termos. Reconhece algumas derrotas, reconhece alguns erros, mas ele sempre o coloca em uma posição muito elevada. Como fica claro aqui no início da fala, Manuel amado por Deus. em contraposição aos gregos, que ele coloca como moles e efeminados. Então, Manuel Comneno seria uma exceção entre o estereótipo dos gregos, como os latinos os percebiam. Esse trecho que eu coloquei da fala de Guilherme de Tiro, ele antecede a rebelião de Andrônico. Então, era um momento em que Guilherme de Tiro, prestes a escrever, contemporâneo aos eventos, sobre a rebelião, sobre a usurpação e o subsequente massacre da população latina de Constantinopla, ele olha novamente para o reinado de Manuel e vê mais uma vez com bons olhos. O reinado de Manuel parece ter sido ainda melhor diante dos acontecimentos de 1182. Sobre a rebelião de Andrônico, em 1182, Guilherme escreve: eles, os príncipes do palácio, inclusão nossa, convocaram Andrônico o Velho, um primo do falecido imperador, do Ponto, onde ele governava, para que ele pudesse assisti-los em sua trama maligna para remover Aleixo, o proto-Sebastos, do controle dos negócios do reino. Assim convocado, Andrônico veio à cidade trazendo consigo grandes forças de tropas bárbaras. Ele acampou ao longo do Helesponto, à plena vista da cidade, e tomou posse de toda a Bitínia. Certos nobres poderosos, que haviam sido enviados para resistir suas tentativas, traiçoeiramente desertaram para seu lado. A deserção daqueles que passaram para o lado de Andrônico enfraqueceu grandemente a causa do nosso povo, bem como fez o fato de que muitos outros notáveis e também um grande número de cidadãos mostraram seu partidarismo por Andrônico não mais em segredo, mas em público. O que acontece é que após a morte de Manuel I Comneno, seu filho, Aleixo II, tinha cerca de 11 anos, e a regência passou para a mãe dele, que era a imperatriz Maria de Antioquia. Maria de Antioquia, ela tinha ascendência normanda, ela vinha dos reinos cruzados, ela tinha simpatia e aliança muito forte com os elementos de Pisa e de Gênova, que se encontravam naquele momento em Constantinopla, e ela não tinha muitos aliados entre a família imperial, entre os comnenos. E muitos gregos se ressentiram do fato de que eles tinham agora uma imperatriz latina controlando os rumos de seu império. Warren Treadgold, em Uma História da Sociedade e Estado Bizantinos, ele afirma que Maria Comnena ela se torna freira, ao menos oficialmente, assume o nome de Xena ou Zina, e, ao mesmo tempo, ela desenvolve um relacionamento amoroso com Aleixo, a quem Guilherme se refere, Aleixo proto-Sebastos, que era da família dos Comnenos. E Aleixo, nessa relação, suspeita-se de uma relação com a imperatriz, ele se torna, de fato, regente do reino, e foi algo muito mal visto, tanto por gregos quanto por latinos da época. Foi uma relação escandalosa, vamos dizer assim. E a política de Aleixo ela desagrada a todos. Ele consegue alienar tanto os grupos latinos, que a imperatriz buscava favorecer, quanto grupos gregos que se ressentiam do fato de tantos latinos estarem em posição de poder. E surgem tramas e conspirações, a que Guilherme de Tiro alude quando ele fala sobre os príncipes do palácio que convocaram Andrônico. Houveram conspirações dentro de membros da família imperial, lideradas principalmente por Maria, chamada Porphyrogenneta, que era Maria Comnena, filha mais velha do imperador falecido Manuel I, mas que foi preterida da sucessão em virtude de seu irmão mais novo, que, como eu mencionei, era uma criança no momento da morte do pai, e o marido dela, que era Renier de Montferrat, que, apesar de latino, naquele momento se opunha à imperatriz de origem latina. Eles procuram assassinar o Aleixo, falham em sua tentativa de conspiração, mas conseguem se refugiar em Hagia Sophia e eles conseguem despertar o ânimo das multidões. Eles enviam mensagens para Andrônico, que era primo do falecido imperador, como coloca Guilherme de Tiro. Era um personagem bastante conhecido do Oriente Latino, do universo grego, uma vez que ele havia sido senhor de Beirute, ele havia sido diversas vezes exilado e se reconciliado com o seu primo Manuel. Era uma figura que havia viajado pelo Oriente, alguns afirmam que havia chegado até Bagdá. Era um aventureiro, um guerreiro, a essa altura já idoso, e sempre, como o Guilherme de Tiro faz uma descrição muito negativa dele, que ele sempre estava envolvido em tramas. A cada momento, a cada oportunidade, ele era perdoado, mas se envolvia novamente em tramas, buscando sempre poder. Então, nesse momento, essa facção anti-latina, vamos dizer assim, de Constantinopla, convoca Andrônico para, se não assumir o poder, mas ao menos remover os regentes e ter tutela sobre Aleixo II, e ele avança diante da cidade. E à medida que ele avança, aqueles que forem enviados para detê-lo passam para o seu lado. Alguns autores afirmam que chegou a haver um confronto, mas que depois da derrota, os generais e almirantes passaram para o lado de Andrônico. Outros afirmam que não chegou a haver combate, que simplesmente houve uma aliança e não houve no fim das contas, não houve uma forte resistência que impedisse que ele, de seus territórios da Paflagônia, avançasse com tropas até Constantinopla. João Vicente de Medeiros Públio Dias, ele escreve no seu artigo Modelo de Legitimação de Oposição Política em Bizâncio, que as formas de sucessão e transmissão do poder imperial eram várias. Não há um modelo específico de sucessão, não havia um modelo específico no universo bizantino. Então, a sucessão do herdeiro nomeado pelo antigo imperador, muitas vezes seu filho, ela não era garantida. E haviam mecanismos que podemos chamar de populistas, que às vezes a aclamação popular, às vezes o desejo de uma parte da aristocracia, eles faziam valer e haviam de fato usurpações. Então, nesse momento, houve um grande ressentimento da população grega de Constantinopla contra o que eles percebiam como uma dominação latina. Houve um interesse da aristocracia comnena, que perdeu sua posição de poder, de trazer o que eles viam como sendo um dos seus para tomar o poder, e acabou acontecendo esse processo de usurpação, que terminou por ser bem sucedido. Guilherme de Tiro afirma: assim que entraram nos portões, estas tropas, ajudadas pelos cidadãos, correram para o distrito da cidade ocupado pelos latinos e passaram a fio de espada os poucos remanescentes que tinham ou ficado relutantes ou sido incapazes de fugir com os outros. Independentemente de tratados e dos muitos serviços que nosso povo havia prestado ao império, os gregos apreenderam todos que pareciam capazes de resistência, puseram fogo em suas casas e rapidamente reduziram o distrito a cinzas. De tal maneira, a pérfida nação grega, um ninho de víboras, como uma serpente no seio ou um rato no guarda-roupa, recompensou malvadamente seus convidados. Aqueles que não mereciam tal tratamento e estavam longe de antecipar qualquer coisa do tipo. Aqueles a quem haviam entregue suas filhas, sobrinhas e irmãs como esposas e que, por longa convivência, haviam se tornado seus amigos. Então, à medida que as tropas, que na realidade foram as tropas avançadas de Andrônico I, já que de imediato ele não adentra a cidade, elas entram, atravessam os portões, os cidadãos insuflados, eles correm a todo instante para atacar os latinos, a população latina, na realidade, que havia permanecido. Isso acossados, instigados também pelo clero ortodoxo, já que nessa época havia o grande cisma entre a igreja romana e a igreja ortodoxa grega, e os clérigos de Bizâncio instigaram a população, principalmente a atacar os monges, a atacar os padres. Houve um legado papal chamado Cardeal João, que foi decapitado na rua, capturado pela multidão. Então a população se insuflou, atacou, pôs fogo nesses distritos, principalmente habitados por mercadores italianos, como falei, de Pisa, Amalfi e Gênova. A quantidade de venezianos nesse momento não era grande, porque eles haviam tido desavenças com Manuel Comneno, tanto é que posteriormente, com o Andrônico já instalado como imperador, eles voltam a fazer negócio com eles, voltam a se estabelecer em Constantinopla. Mas aqueles que estavam no momento, pisanos e genoveses, foram muitos assassinados, muitos foram vendidos como escravos para os turcos e para outros muçulmanos, e Guilherme de Tiro ele escreve isso perceptivelmente com uma grande decepção, porque durante toda a carreira dele ele procurou fortalecer as relações com Constantinopla. Como eu falei, ele havia sido embaixador, ele havia liderado missões, ele era chanceler de Jerusalém, arcebispo de Tiro, ele tinha uma posição privilegiada, e até mesmo no último ano de governo de Manuel Comneno, ele havia passado 7 meses em embaixada em Bizâncio, e ele tinha uma certa apreciação pelos gregos, pelo que eles podiam fazer pelos reinos cruzados, pelos estados latinos do Oriente. Não há julgamentos em sua obra a respeito, por exemplo, das diferenças religiosas. Em nenhum momento ele chama os gregos bizantinos de hereges ou os critica por suas práticas diferenciadas de liturgia, isto é, até esse momento. Quando ocorre o massacre com a rebelião de Andrônico, ele fala pela primeira vez sua narrativa, eu acabei não colocando aqui por questão de espaço, para não me alongar em excesso, mas ele pela primeira vez se refere aos gregos como cismáticos e heréticos. Porque aquele foi o momento que parece que ele percebeu que tudo que ele procurou construir em boas relações desmoronou por causa do ataque à população latina. Esses ataques possivelmente não foram de fato ordenados por Andrônico, mas simplesmente ocorreram porque os sentimentos antilatinos, o ressentimento pelas rivalidades comerciais, pelos percebidos privilégios que tinham durante o governo de Manuel Comneno e sob a curta duração da regência da imperatriz Maria de Antioquia, isso fez com que a população de fato pegasse as armas e procurassem atacar os seus percebidos como inimigos. Muitos haviam fugido com a notícia da aproximação de Andrônico da Bitínia. Muitos haviam invadido a cidade, então não foram todos mortos. Não se pode estimar quantos de fato foram assassinados ou vendidos como escravos. Guilherme de Tiro chega a afirmar que 4.000 foram vendidos à escravidão para os muçulmanos, mas não há de fato como precisar esses números. David Nicholl, na sua obra Bizâncio e Veneza, um estudo em relações diplomáticas e culturais, ele afirma que foi um grande momento divisor esse massacre, porque as relações com as cidades italianas elas se deterioraram de uma forma que levou-se muito tempo para se recuperar, se é que se recuperaram de fato. E a quantidade de igrejas saqueadas, a quantidade de clérigos mortos, enfim, isso serviu para tornar perceptível de forma muito mais evidente para muitos a ruptura entre os cristãos gregos e os cristãos latinos. Por fim, comentando o que afirma Edbury e Rowe em sua obra Guilherme de Tiro, historiador do Oriente Latino, Guilherme de Tiro, de fato, ele recorre a uma linguagem que é muito derrogatória para designar os gregos. Como eu falei, no início da narrativa, ele afirmou que os gregos eram efeminados, e é que afirma que são traiçoeiros, que a nação grega é um ninho de víboras, que são serpentes, que são ratos. E esse sentimento de Guilherme é, de fato, uma percepção muito preponderante entre os latinos a respeito dos gregos. E parece que, neste momento, Guilherme chega à conclusão de que aquilo que ele estava tentando combater, aquela xenofobia, vamos dizer assim, que ele procurava amainar, que ele procurava suprimir com relações diplomáticas e alianças militares positivas, é como se percebesse que aquilo de fato era a verdade. Que mesmo com os casamentos, mesmo com a proximidade, mesmo com a convivência e as amizades que ele percebia haver entre esses dois povos, nesse momento tudo vem a ruir diante da chegada de Andrônico e o massacre que é realizado diante dos latinos de Constantinopla. Finalizando, a rebelião de Andrônico I Comneno foi o catalisador de sentimentos antilatinos entre a população de Constantinopla. O massacre subsequente aprofundou a fissura entre o Império Bizantino e a cristandade latina, desfazendo progressos alcançados durante o reinado de Manuel I Comneno. Neste contexto, Guilherme de Tiro viu-se em uma posição insólita. Após uma carreira na qual buscou fomentar boas relações entre Bizâncio e Jerusalém, em uma aliança conjunta contra os infiéis, os eventos de 1182 o levaram a crer que os preconceitos latinos eram, afinal, corretos. Os gregos eram traiçoeiros e falsos cristãos. As consequências deste ajuste de percepção escapam aos limites desta comunicação. Esperamos, contudo, que ela possa servir de estímulo para que novas pesquisas e debates possam surgir acerca das ricas e complexas relações entre os Estados latinos e o Império Bizantino. Aqui as referências. Agradeço muito a atenção de todos. Desculpe pelo volume que ficou flutuando em alguns momentos. E é isso. Muito obrigado.
Muito obrigado, Ives. Já tenho algumas perguntas para você, porque eu também estudo esse período aí. No final, vou tentar fazer alguma pergunta. Bom, vou chamar a próxima comunicadora. I'll try to speak now in English. I'm called the next speaker, Dimitra Mytili. I hope I didn't butcher her name. She's a PhD student at the University of Ioannina in Greece, and her communication is entitled "Did Empress Zoe Porphyrogenneta poison Emperor Romanos III?" Dimitra, you can start now.
Okay. Did you hear me? Did you see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Greetings to everybody from the city of Ioannina in Western Greece. I'm Dimitra Mytili. I'm a PhD candidate at the Department of History and Archaeology at the University of Ioannina. The subject of my speech was a really, really small part of my master thesis about Empress Zoe Porphyrogenneta, and something that I always wanted to bring it back again. Did Empress Zoe poison Emperor Romanos III Argyros? In the early hours of Holy Friday, Emperor Romanos III died after an assassination attempt on the baths. According to the Byzantine historian Michael Psellos, the emperor wanted to be prepared for the impending great feast of resurrection and Easter. The murders left him unconscious when suddenly someone showed up and pulled him out of the bath. A great commotion happened in the palace. Many people gathered to see the emperor, but Romanos could not even speak. He only communicated with gestures. Suddenly, he began to gasp, and after he took a thick black liquid out of his mouth, he died. Romanos had been ill in the last years of his life due to an anonymous disease. But we do know the symptoms of this disease, as well as the bad physical and psychological condition of Romanos. His hair were thin, he had severe anorexia, insomnia, difficult breathing, his face resembling a dead man, and he had become an inaccessible man. Psellos is once again the most important source for us, as it not only includes most of the information and details about the emperor's disease, but as he points out, he was an eyewitness to the events. The majority of Byzantine sources attribute the emperor's disease and death to poisoning and not simply to his assassination attempt. The accusations for Romanos' death attributed to the empress and his wife, Zoe. But what was it that led historians to draw such conclusions? Romanos and Zoe were married in 1028, 3 days before the death of her father, Emperor Constantine VIII, who inherited the throne from his brother Basil II. Since Basil never had a family, his nieces were the legal successors, as there was no male successor. So Constantine chose the eparch of the city of Constantinople, Romanos Argyros, to become Zoe's husband. The married life started well, and Romanos fervently praised for a successor. But how could this happen while the empress was almost 50 years old? Her age made it impossible to conceive, and that was why the imperial couple's personal relationship was severed. Romanos' hatred and disgust for Zoe's face intensified even more when he, in order to punish her, forbade her free access to the state's money. Zoe felt despised as a woman, but also as an empress. Romanos' double life, who had an affair with a young woman, and his financial hardship, which was also her Achilles heel, had angered her. The rupture of their relationships, both personally and politically, was a catalyst for Zoe to stand out in an imperial hearing. The young Michael, brother of the eunuch of the imperial court, John the Orphanotrophos. From that moment, the empress was overwhelmed by intense love passion for the beautiful Michael, who at the first place hesitated and was scared of Zoe's pressure, but his brother John persuaded him to give in to her love desires. Soon everyone in the palace, and not only, knew about the empress's love affair with Michael. After all, she didn't try very hard to keep it as a secret. She often quite openly made Michael sit on the imperial throne. Zoe's relationship with Michael and John's ultimate goal of approaching power through his brother, Arphopselos, Skylizis, Kedrinos, Zonaras, Glykas, Manassis, strong evidence for the guilt of the three, especially for Zoe, regarding the disease of Romanos, but also his murder. All historians speak of a chronic poisoning of Romanos with substances that cost him a slow and painful death. The emperor's chronic poisoning is also reinforced by the description of his corpse, once again given to us by Pselos. The Byzantine historian, like another medical examiner, mentioned, "I saw this funeral procession myself. Examining the dead man, I did not really recognize him either from his color or outward appearance. It was only because of the insignia that I guessed the dead man had once been an emperor. His face was completely altered, not wasted away, but swollen, and its color was altogether changed. It was not that of a corpse, but rather reminiscent of men swollen and pale from drinking poison, so that they appeared absolutely bloodless beneath the cheeks. The hair on his head and the hair of his beard were so thinned out that his corrupted frame was like a confield ravaged by fire. You can see the bloodness of it from afar." In 1923, the French doctor, Professor Edouard Janselmet, analyzed the symptoms of Romanos disease and linked them with chronic poisoning by chemical elements such as arsenic, litharge, thallium, and the herbal hellebore, which is mentioned by Pselos. Eventually, Janselmet rejected these natural substances as well as hellebore. However, he made a significant mistake, which was underlined by Dr. John Laskaratos in 1995. Pselos comments, "It was universally accepted among the rest that they first bewitched him, Romanos, with drugs and later had recourse to a mixture of hellebore as well." The Byzantine historian emphasizes that hellebore was given to Romanos as the final straw to his already burned state of health. Laskaratos, unlike Janselmet, claimed that the clinical picture of Romanos disease converges with the chronic poisoning by arsenic. He also emphasizes that Romanos had become so addicted to poisons which were given to him for many years that is why they gave him at the end a very powerful herbal like hellebore and then plotted to kill him. The symptoms of the last moments of the Emperor Romanos coincide with the side effects by hellebore, which in a large dose can accelerate the rate of respiration of human body, paralyzes the nerve system, causes intense puke, and finally death. This is hellebore, white and black. Black is stronger herbal. The above mentioned bad natural substances such as arsenic and hellebore, in a combination with the information we have about the unusual preoccupations of Emperor Zoe with the production of perfumes, can give us answers to our question. Could Zoe be the one who was poisoning Romanos? Once again, Pselos' testimonies will be the guideline for us. In the sixth book of Chronographia, the narration of the events is interrupted and some chapters are inserted in which it's been mentioned the personality and the unusual occupations of the Byzantine emperors who were anything but imperial. Zoe had apparently renounced classic women's pursuits and focused on producing perfumes. It is actually amazing that she had turned her imperial private apartments into laboratories for perfumes. She was spending huge amounts of money on the necessary equipment, and the herbals, which, keep that in mind, used to choose them by herself. Since Empress Zoe was so actively involved in the production process of perfumes, and as Pselos comments, she chose with great zeal the raw materials, the herbals, we can assume that she had knowledge on herbals and their processing, as well as the one who was poisoning Romanos. During the 11th century, there were also other ways of medical knowledge. From the middle of the 1st century, people had the opportunity to get to know the medical plants, their processing, their use through the textbook of military doctor Dioscorides, De Materia Medica, the Latin title, Perilis Iatrikis, the Greek title. The work of Dioscorides, who is considered the father of botany and pharmacology, while the Arabs call him the apostle of the god of botany, is one of the most important textbooks of pharmacology, which was the basis of pharmacology until the 19th century. In the 11th century, the Materia Medica was in the library of the monastery of Prodomos Petra in Constantinople. Both arsenic and hellebore are mentioned by Dioscorides. Their substances, their use, the processing are described. So you can imagine how useful was this medical manual for natural substances and their effects on human body. Moreover, the first book of this huge work is dedicated also to perfumes. So, did Zoe poison Romanos? Yes, she probably did. Her intense involvement with perfumes and raw materials, herbals, and the presence of the most important pharmacology textbook of the time in Constantinople can at least reinforce historians' accusations. But this is not the first time that Byzantine historians have accused an empress for poisoning her husband or someone else or the emperor. The same accusation was made against Empress Theophano, for example, for the death of her husband, Emperor Romanos II, and her father-in-law, Constantine VII Porphyrogenitus. Zoe was once again accused of poisoning John the Orphanotrophos. However, Romilly Jenkins has mentioned, the reckless irresponsibility with which charges of poisoning are bandied about in medieval and modern chronicles should make us extremely chary of accepting rumors of this nature for facts or even for probabilities. In the case of Emperor Zoe, we say that maybe there isn't probability, but a fact. But, do all the charges of poisoning by an empress approach truth, or are they just a part of the general negative attitude of Byzantine historians against the ruling of the empire by a woman? Were Byzantine empresses an easy target for everything bad that was happening to the empire? The Byzantine historians, based on their view regarding the a priori incapability of the female gender to effectively contend with the demands of the role of emperor, a position which was inseparably linked with men throughout the medieval world, focused on the intellectual inability of the empresses and the wider uncertainty surrounding their exercising of imperial authority. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was really inspiring. I also am studying Pselos chronographia, so
yes, I heard
really...
it 2 days ago, I think.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna call the next speaker, Christos Zafiropoulos. He's a PhD student at the Johannes Gutenberg-Universität Mainz in Germany. His communication is entitled Michael, the Palaiologos, Portrayal as a military leader in the Typikon of St. Demetrius Monastery in Constantinople. I believe Chris...
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
But you can see me, or can you?
No, just listen to you.
Wait, I have a
problem.
Okay.
At least if I try to share my screen.
Let me check. Yes, you can try to share your screen. I mean,
screen share.
Your webcam is off, but we are hearing you very well. So,
Well, that's good.
oh, we can see it now. We can see your
You can see the
slides.
presentation. Okay, at
Yeah.
least you can see that. I'll try later to appear.
Okay.
So, first of all, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'd like to thank you for allowing me to be part of your conference. Currently, I'm a PhD student in the research training group Byzantium and the Euro-Mediterranean Cultures of War in Mainz, Germany. The topic of my dissertation is descriptions of combatants in the Byzantine textual sources during the reign of the first Palaiologan emperors, 1259 to 1320. This project has two main research questions. The first one concerns the way the historiographers and writers of this era describe the combatants, emperors, commanders-in-chief, and imperial forces that served in the Byzantine army. And the second question is about to which degree those descriptions were following a pre-existed and specific writing model regarding the narration of wars. One important chapter of my thesis concerns the image of Michael VIII Palaiologos as a military leader. In today's presentation, we will focus on the way Emperor Michael presents himself as a military ruler in the Typikon for the monastery of St. Demetrius in Constantinople. Although the document has been often studied from a historical perspective, such as by Dino Giannakopoulos in its important monography on Michael, there is a lack of sufficient examination of the emperor's self-depiction as a military leader. A Typikon is a document that contains a set of regulations dictating the administrative organization, the rules of behavior, and the religious rituals of the community of a monastery. In 1282, Michael probably dictated to the imperial secretariat his text, which has two parts. In the first part, the emperor talks about his life, and in the second one, he refers to the monastic life of St. Demetrius. Unlike the only three Typikons previously issued by emperors, such as that of John Tzimiskis, Constantine IX Monomachos, and John II Komnenos, the Typikon of Michael is the only Typikon that contains lengthy information on the emperor's military deeds from 1242 to 1282. Here we should also say that Michael composed a Typikon for the monastery of Archangel Michael on Mount Axedios near Chalkidon, which includes short references to the emperor's career up to the reconquest of Constantinople in 1261. But before Michael, we found only the Typikon of John II Komnenos for the monastery of Christ Pantocrator in Constantinople, brief allusions to the military deeds of the emperor, such as when John thanks God for helping him ascend the throne, for protecting him against conspiracies, for granting him victories against various enemies such as Turks, Pazinaks, Serbians, Hungarians, and Bulgarians. Emperor Michael reconstructed the church of St. Demetrius that his ancestor Georgios Palaiologos erected in the 11th century. George Palaiologos was a general and brother-in-law of Alexius I Komnenos.
Sorry, Christos, I'm sorry. Did you run your slides? Did you change your slides because it's freeze?
Can you see now?
No, you have to select the first option when you go to share screen. You probably is sharing your app's screen, right? You have to share the entire of your screen. That's the first option. Can you
wait
turn
a
it
minute.
off and then try again?
Wait a minute, because my browser is.
Okay, okay.
1 minute.
Okay.
So
fine.
now, what you can see now?
I'm seeing the second slide, but when you stay there, it didn't run.
Let me. If I because I'm already in share, right? Share.
Okay. You go to share screen,
Yeah.
and then you select the first option, the entire of your screen, something like that. And you click on the
It doesn't.
miniature, then you go to share. What? Sorry.
It doesn't give me this option.
But which option is appearing to you?
Only if, share screen and only this. It doesn't.
Yeah, you go to share screen, and then it will open a pop-up.
No. So I choose entire screen, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I did, and now.
Yeah, it's right now. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
I'm sorry.
It was complicated because the browser opening in a different way. So yeah.
It's okay.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry for this. I was saying about the that Emperor Michael reconstructed the church of Saint Demetrius that his ancestor Georgios Palaiologos erected in the 11th century. Georgios Palaiologos was a general and brother-in-law of Alexios I Comnenos, whom he helped to ascend in power, according to Alexiad, the work that Anna Comnene, daughter of Alexios, composed. Michael VIII unified the Church of St. Demetrius with the monastery of the Mother of God Achiropeitos, or Kelibara, located to the south of the top of Mount Latros in southwestern Turkey. The monks of Kelibara, fearing that the Turks would soon occupy their foundation, decided to resettle in the safer area of the capital. Michael combined this fact with his plan to add a monastery to the Church of St. Demetrius. According to George Mazeska, the author of the book Russian Travelers to Constantinople in the 14th and 15th centuries, the monastery was located between the Kontoskalion harbor and the Jewish gate at Vlaga, which is near the old port of Theodosius or Eleftherios, but no remains have been found. If it allows me, with the laser point here, you can see. Can you see the laser point? So.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Sorry. Okay.
Before we proceed to the document, it's important to start with some historical events that shaped Michael's reign and mentioned as well in his text, and are crucial for understanding the context in which Michael constructed his image as military leader. After that, we will present the Typikon with selected text references that highlight Michael's military portrait, and last, in the conclusions, we'll summarize Michael's image and compare it with that of his predecessors, the Lascarids, to demonstrate the change in the imperial image under Michael Palaiologos. Here's the structure. You can see. So here is the map of the Byzantine Empire around 1265, and I will say some things in order to have the general idea. For example, Mount Latros, as I said before, is located here. So, it's well known that in 1204, the Byzantine Empire was conquered by the Latin warriors of the Fourth Crusade. On the ruins of the former Byzantine state, the Latin Empire of Constantinople and other Frankish states were founded. The Byzantines, however, organized their resistance to the conquerors by forming the states of Nicaea, Epirus, Thessaly, and Trebizond. The so-called Empire of Nicaea gradually took precedence over the other Greek states, and Michael Palaiologos became its emperor in 1259 by setting aside the legal successor John IV Lascaris. That year, Michael won a decisive battle against the Kingdom of Sicily and its allies in Pelagonia and consolidated his power. In 1261, he recovered Constantinople, becoming the emperor of the restored Byzantine state and the founder of its last dynasty. In December 1261, John Lascaris was blinded under Michael's orders. Patriarch Arsenius excommunicated Michael, and the emperor deposed him in 1264. The supporters of Arsenius created an opposition that would grow with the years, and we will mention later. Michael's goals as the new emperor of Constantinople were to preserve the throne and his empire and to reoccupy the territories that belonged to Byzantium before 1204. Nonetheless, the emperor had to deal with numerous dangers. The Western Europe that was attempting to reinstitute the Latin Empire, the Principality of Achaia, you can see here in the map, Bulgaria and Serbia, Venice and Genoa that both were trying to prevail financially over Byzantium, the Seljuk Turks and the Mongols of the Ilkhanate and of the Golden Horde. The most urgent problem for Michael was the aim of the papacy and of some Western European rulers to restore the Latin Empire. In 1267, the ruler of the Kingdom of Sicily, Charles I of Anjou, the brother of the King of France, Louis IX, began his preparations to attack Constantinople, but Michael thwarted his plans. After many years of diplomatic efforts that had begun in 1259, Michael managed to ally with the papacy by submitting the Orthodox Church to the Catholic one through the Second Council of Lyons in 1274. This temporarily prevented Charles' campaign. However, this caused great turbulence in the interior of the state, and most of the clergy and the people went against the emperor, whom they considered as a friend of the Latins and an enemy of the true faith, accusing him of being heretic. Patriarch Joseph I, successor of Arsenius, after a brief tenure of Germanus III, refused to accept the union and was deposed. His supporters, along with those of Arsenius, made the situation even more difficult for the emperor. In 1281, Martin IV, a French pope and a supporter of Charles, cancelled the ecclesiastical union, and a major attack against the Byzantine Empire was planned for 1283. That year, the army of Charles of Anjou landed in modern Albania, captured some fortresses, and attacked the fort of Perat. The Byzantines were able to repel them, securing Constantinople from a land attack. Charles changed his plan and decided to attack by sea. The revolt of the population of Sicily, which began on 31st March 1282, and it's known as Sicilian Vespers, forced Charles to focus his attention on the island, delay his expedition, and to abandon it at the end. The danger was staved off, and Michael was relatively safe. But let's see now how Michael constructs his narrative in the Typikon. Michael begins the construction of his military portrait by stating that he descends from glorious ancestors, known from their combat in wartime, their generalship, and their valor. His grandfather was the supreme commander of the navy, and his father the supreme commander of the army, and both were very pious. Then Michael mentions that he was under the guidance of the Emperor of Nicaea, John III Vatatzis, and that since he was capable of bearing arms, he was assigned by him to command a campaign in the West. With God's help, he was victorious, as Michael says, And later he adds that he commanded more expeditions against the Latin, whom he won while Vatatzes was still alive. These so-called campaigns are not attested by any contemporaneous sources. However, the fact that Michael mentions these operations and Vatatzes is not a coincidence. Michael wants to stress the fact that he is a good military leader, as Vatatzes himself, who was a competent commander-emperor, acknowledged his skills. Moreover, he wants to show that he is a legal successor of Vatatzes, both through this connection with the military skills and also by mentioning in a later passage that he married Vatatzes' niece. Michael then refers to his escape to the Seljuk Turks and that he helped them to defeat the Mongols of the Ilkhanate in the Turkish territory. This detail is not irrelevant. Michael was trying to emphasize that he was successful in fighting in both European and Asiatic terrain. For this victory, Michael praises again God for his help. Afterwards, Michael narrates in lengthy how he prevailed in Pelagonia, for, as he said, "We accomplished mighty deeds in you, our God, and it was you who reduced our enemies to naught." This phrase in a variant form we found again in the Old Testament, and we'll keep that in mind because we'll later come back to this. Michael continues by saying that he subjugated many regions in Greece. In fact, he refers to the attacks against the state of Thessaly and Epirus, in which he did not participate. It was his brother John Palaiologos who marched against Thessaly, and his general Alexios Stratigopoulos who invaded Epirus and captured Arta. Michael also mentions victories against the Bulgarians, Mongols, and Turks, always thanks to God's assistance. Michael then refers to the recapture of Constantinople, mentioning that it was a God's gift. To further strengthen that it was God's present given to him, because he was worthy of it, Michael highlights that previous emperors, even though they made their attempts with noble enthusiasm and with faultless military skill, appear to be shooting arrows straight up into the sky and to be attempting the impossible. The reconquest of Constantinople was not an accomplishment of the emperor, but of his general Alexios Stratigopoulos, and of course Michael deliberately omits this fact. Then Michael narrates once more victories over the Turks, Bulgarians, and Mongols, and that he conquered almost whole Abia, something that his admiral Licario managed to do. In the last part of his autobiography, Michael talks about victories in Peloponnesus, victories against Serbs, Bulgarians, and the Turks, and about his greatest opponent, Charles of Anjou, for whom he dedicates many lines. Michael mentions that he defeated Charles in every encounter with the help of God. Michael makes an allusion to the Battle of Berat in 1281, and he emphasizes the greatness of this victory by presenting the enemy as superior, an enemy who had a large number of elite fighting men with abundance of horses, weapons, and all the equipment of war. Charles' army besieged the fort of Berat until God delivered the victory to Michael. As the emperor points out one more time. Rounding up Michael's portrayal in the Typikon he composed, we can see that the emperor presents himself as an always victorious military leader whose piety and not his military skills guarantee the outcome of his conflicts. That is, he's victorious because he's pious. He even mentioned victories that were not existent. Except for the way Michael describes his achievement, it's important to stress the choice of the words and expressions he uses. We mentioned an example before, there are many more, where the emperor draws from the ecclesiastical vocabulary, especially that of the Old Testament, and of the three church fathers, John Chrysostom, Gregorius of Nyssa, and Gregorius Nazianzenus. The question that arises is, why did Michael portray himself as pious, and what is the difference with the way the emperor was depicted during the Lascarides? Michael emphasized his personal piety for two reasons. First, to legitimize his ascension after seizing the throne from the legal successor John IV Lascaris. Second, to defend himself against the accusations of being heretic and of favoring the Latins, for imposing the union between the Orthodox and Catholic Church on his subjects. For these reasons, Michael revived the imperial model of a pious Christian leader, first applied to Constantine I by Eusebius of Caesarea, and used this model of a pious Christian leader as a model of legitimization of his authority. To understand more the difference, we have to mention what was the situation during the Lascaride dynasty. Under the Lascarides, the depiction of the emperor in rhetoric as a great warrior was much promoted because of the prevailing ideology of militarism and reconquest in the Empire of Nicaea. The emperor should inspire his troops and at the same time be a bold and courageous warrior, a true military leader. Theodore I Lascaris, the first ruler of Nicaea, was depicted as emperor general by the official propaganda, as he personally commanded the army in all crucial battles of his era and triumphed over his enemies. Theodore was portrayed as ready to cross the country to repulse the state's foes, and according to the panegyrists, Theodore showed also interest in Western Asia Minor and tried to boost the fighting spirit of the local people, which was diminished due to the military successes of the Latins. Theodore's successor, John III Vatatzes, is depicted as a great commander who led military expeditions tirelessly by night and fought only with the sword, without wearing any armor to protect him. Vatatzes here, Theodore II, in his writings, present the ideal ruler as a military commander and stresses that bravery, trophies, military victories, and enduring the hardship of campaigns are imperial tasks. This militaristic image of the Nicene emperor changed in Michael's era after the reconquest of Constantinople. In the imperial oration of his time, Michael was always portrayed as a skilled commander, but it was piety, the element that granted him victory. And in the same way, Michael depicted himself in the Typikon. As we mentioned, he wanted to differentiate himself from the previous dynasty and to justify his accession to the throne and his church policy with a union of the churches, Catholic and Orthodox. For this reason, he used the model of a pious emperor. George Pachymeris, the contemporary historian, presented Michael in a total different way, in a way that of a vicious emperor, that the victories are not granted by God but by his generals, and that in general Michael is presented as a usurper that didn't deserve the throne as the Lascarides did, because Pachymeris was a supporter of the Lascaride dynasty. That shows how different the reality was from the image that Michael himself tried to construct. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was a very interesting topic.
Thank you.
Now I'm gonna call Ivan Rey from the Universidade Nacional de 3 de Febrero in Argentina. His communication is entitled Em Busca de las Formas Ideales de Defender ao Império, las máximas militares en el Strategicon atribuido a Mauricio. Professor Ivan, sorry again for my Spanish, but...
No problem. No hay problema. Bueno, buenas tardes a todas y a todos. Antes de empezar con mi presentación y tratando de ser cuidadoso con el tiempo, quería, bueno, celebrar que en esta situación tan complicada que estamos viviendo con la emergencia sanitaria, la Universidad de San Pablo haya podido llevar adelante este encuentro y por muchos más. Yo, para colaborar a cumplir con los tiempos que están dispuestos, les traje una presentación de lo que es un artículo que estoy preparando, que va a estar en inglés para colaborar con el auditorio que no es hispanoparlante. Entonces, vamos a tratar de avanzar en 3 aspectos. Primero, hacer un pequeño raconto de cuál es la situación del ejército bizantino en el siglo VI, para reconstruir un poco el contexto de creación de la obra que vamos a referir. Este texto, el Typikon, que es atribuido en muchos de los manuscritos del esquema del texto a la persona de Mauricio, pero como se da en otro tipo de textos de carácter militar, como por ahí la táctica de León el Sabio, muchas veces esta atribución se da por la elaboración en el contexto cortesano del emperador y no significa siempre que se deba a la pluma del monarca. Pero bueno, en el primer lugar vamos a empezar entonces con una breve recomposición de cuál era la situación en la cual se generó esta obra. Entonces, vemos que a partir del reinado del emperador Justiniano, como sabemos, la renovatio va a implicar una gran expansión territorial, la recuperación de muchas de las provincias que se habían perdido en el siglo pasado, y eso va a generar una serie de transformaciones profundas en la estructura militar del imperio, que va a estar signada por un crecimiento exponencial. Si seguimos el modelo que podemos datar en la Notitia Dignitatum en el Oriente, 5 mandos militares al mando de un general strategos magister militum, en este periodo vemos que la estructura se expande hasta una totalidad de aproximadamente 9 comandos. Esto significa no solo un enorme desafío logístico y organizativo, sino significa que la generación de un público lector para esta obra, digamos. O sea, a este colectivo de dignatarios del Estado romano-bizantino sería el cual estaría dirigido un texto de estas características. ¿Para qué vemos? En la primera etapa, bueno, el funcionamiento expansivo, un cierto grado de cohesión. Hay rebeliones como se da, por ejemplo, en África, una vez que es reconquistada por la campaña de Belisario, pero que en el primer momento la estructura se expande sin mayores problemas. Ahora sí, lo que empieza a percibirse que es la situación de un sobredimensionamiento de que la expansión y problemas de recursos humanos y materiales asociados a la misma que ya se verifican. Esto lo podemos ver en Procopio y en otras fuentes, al final del reinado de Justiniano, cuando el Estado tiene dificultades para reponer sus fuerzas. Recordamos aquí también el impacto de la peste, que a partir de la segunda mitad del reinado de Justiniano va a tener un gran impacto en la base poblacional y en la base fiscal del imperio. Entonces, esta es una foto. Yo aquí les traje, bueno, las conversiones como aparecen en fuentes latinas y en fuentes griegas de los diferentes comandos que existen al comienzo del periodo. Esta situación se va a transformar en la segunda mitad del siglo VI. El agotamiento de los recursos humanos y materiales del imperio va a llevar a que esta expansión sea muy costosa y muy difícil de sostener. Eso lo veremos en el retroceso de las fronteras imperiales y en las dificultades que van a tener estos funcionarios del Estado a cargo de las fuerzas militares para sostener sus territorios. No va a ser una estructura estática, claro está, va a haber espacios de innovación. ¿Para qué? Para tratar de recomponer, por ejemplo, en las provincias occidentales, la instauración de esta nueva dignidad y esta nueva organización territorial de los exarcados, digamos. Pero este tipo de presión, los ingresos de eslavos, de lombardos y otros pueblos, los choques con los sasánidas van a llevar a que claramente un aumento de conflictividad militar muy grande, de tensiones, presiones, que va a desencadenar finalmente el golpe de Focas y el asesinato de Mauricio en el 602, poniendo fin a lo que había sido el intento renovatio del siglo VI, las reformas de Mauricio para tratar de recomponer la situación y ya poner en pie un escenario de mucha mayor conflictividad con la guerra romano-sasánida 602, 628, 629 y la invasión musulmana posterior. Aquí les traje, bueno, también esta situación de que es más difícil trazar algunas de las dignidades, la nominación, pero bueno, acá estaba estos 9 mandos que se habían generado en el siglo VI. Antes de pasar a la próxima etapa, esto es una reconstrucción de qué es un ejército, qué es lo que mandan estos hombres según el ideal del estratégico. Bueno, es este tipo de estructuración, que está reconstruida de lo que son los números y las proporciones que propone el autor de, podemos llamarlo Mauricio, pseudo Mauricio, de la obra como la conformación ideal. Fíjense, en Agatías tenemos números de otros autores de entre 100.000 y 150.000 hombres para la totalidad de las fuerzas disponibles para el imperio en el periodo, pero un ejército en campaña, un mando territorial, tiene alrededor de 20.000 hombres, 25.000 hombres, y también lo que se refleja en la propuesta programática del Typikon es la complejidad y la organización. Esto, si lo adaptamos, claro está, a las formas específicas de Estado de la antigüedad, que no tienen nada que ver con los Estados-nación contemporáneos, esto es un ejército. Hay una estructura de mandos, de comunicaciones, etcétera, 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 que permiten, bueno, que haya no solo una oficialidad, sino la necesidad de un entrenamiento. Y la tasa digamos, de reemplazos de estos oficiales también explica que la necesidad de un texto, o la necesidad de textos que ya sabemos que se adentraban en el periodo helenístico y clásico, las primeras obras en este sentido, que de tener una información breve, concreta, para igualar en este colectivo muy diverso las posibilidades de llevar a cabo las operaciones militares que se espera de estos dignatarios del Estado. Entonces, lo que vamos a hablar un poquito antes de ir a ver algunos fragmentos es de la obra en sí. Entonces, ¿qué tenemos? Ya les digo, pseudo Mauricio, el texto adjudicado a Mauricio, pero bueno, se atribuye en algunos de los manuscritos, George Denis, el fallecido, ha sido su estudioso principal, su traductor y el responsable en nuestras versiones contemporáneas para las que hemos trabajado aquí, ha elegido consignarlo a su persona, pero bueno, es algo discutido. Lo que sí es posible sostener con más seguridad es que el autor de la obra es un especialista, es uno de estos hombres, uno de los generales del emperador. Ahora, es un libro práctico, o sea, es una situación que tiene la literatura técnica, tiene gráficos, tiene representación de maniobras, del establecimiento de las diferentes unidades en el campo de batalla, y tiene una redacción griega que apuesta no a lo que va a ser el lenguaje cortesano y elevado de obras como la de Procopio Cesárea, sino a brindar de la forma más sencilla los datos que el autor sugiere que el general en campaña debe conocer y debe aplicar. Ahora, esto que va a reflejar también los cambios en este pensamiento militar romano-bizantino con las transformaciones que se dieron a partir del dominado. Porque ¿qué vamos a ver aquí? Un ejército romano que tiene una postura totalmente defensiva. Yo seleccioné algunas máximas para que veamos juntos rápidamente, pero no es este ejército del periodo del Principado extendido con campamentos legionarios en el limes imperial, sino un ejército disminuido, más compacto, basado en el uso de las fuerzas de caballería, en cierta medida imitando que la experiencia y las prácticas tanto de los sasánidas como de los pueblos del periodo de las migraciones que pusieron en desuso las viejas formas de hacer la guerra. Ahora, también es importante destacar esta situación de que el Typikon es prácticamente uno de los últimos, con el de Vegesio, de Re Militari, de estas obras que representan, digamos, lo que necesitaba la paideia de la antigüedad en cuanto a el desarrollo de las operaciones militares. Es decir, unos textos específicos para una referencia letrada para los oficiales de las fuerzas militares romanas. Bueno, y lo que vamos a tratar de ver en los minutos que nos quedan son algunos ejemplos. Yo estoy intentando hacer una clasificación de estas máximas que están en la segunda parte, la nómica, de la segunda parte del libro 8 de la obra. Entonces, vamos a, para no extendernos demasiado, a ir sobre ellas. Entonces, aquí la clasificación es temporal, no he terminado todavía el artículo que estoy armando, pero la tarea que se está llevando adelante es tomar las 101 máximas que hay en el texto y tratar de definir a qué categoría de lo que son las necesidades o lo que se espera de estos hombres aplica cada una de ellas. Yo les traje, vamos a ir rápidamente para que en 8 minutos que nos quedan poder cumplir con esto, ir viendo cuáles, digamos, las diferentes categorías y cuáles son expresiones, ejemplos de qué es lo que este autor, como un pensamiento corto, no son los grandes libros que contienen la obra donde hay un desarrollo de maniobras, de forma de posicionamiento del ejército, de la comunicación, sino como informaciones más breves, más concisas, pero que hacen a la labor de estos estrategos magister militum en el periodo. Entonces, fíjense, en la primera, bueno, ¿cómo debe ser el general? Acá la virtud que se sostiene es, bueno, es la prudencia. Esta situación de garantizar la seguridad del ejército, garantizar la seguridad de las tropas. Esto se va a volver más patente en el siglo VII, pero se llega a una situación donde el Estado romano bizantino no se puede permitir perder un ejército en una batalla campal. Y los oficiales a cargo de las fuerzas imperiales tienen que tener una conciencia muy marcada de ello y adaptar su estrategia o sus tácticas a esta situación y a este imperativo que es el de la preservación de recursos humanos y materiales cada vez más difíciles de reponer. Vamos a la segunda parte, que algún ejemplo de las relaciones entre el jefe y sus oficiales. Acá está esta situación que se ve también en las instrucciones generales y otras partes de la obra de conocer a cada uno y darle el rol que le corresponde. No lo tenemos aquí por una cuestión de espacio, pero por ejemplo denota en otros espacios quién puede ser un explorador, quién puede estar en el consejo antes de lanzar una campaña del general, etcétera, etcétera, etcétera. Entonces vamos a la tercera, con los soldados. O sea, fíjense, aquí está la situación del secreto. Hay una ambivalencia en lo que son las máximas y las instrucciones respecto de los soldados. Por un lado está esta situación de separar funcionalmente al emperador de sus soldados. Por otro lado está esta situación de protegerlos, de cuidarlos, de ser severo pero justo. Entonces, pero acá está la situación de no poner en riesgo la seguridad del ejército por transmitir datos que pueden ser clave a un público abierto generalizado. Eso no significa no dar discursos, no hablar a la asamblea de las fuerzas militares, pero no a nivel del consejo de la toma de decisiones. Bueno, acá los soldados, fíjense, tenemos aquí, bueno, un aspecto que marca que la necesidad de el entrenamiento, de mantener a la tropa ocupada, ¿para qué? Para mantener la obediencia y la eficiencia combativa de esto no es una hueste, esto intenta ser un ejército. Hay una normativa, hay premios, hay castigos, y está esta situación de mantener la actividad para evitar efectos perjudiciales en el espíritu, en la moral de las tropas. A nivel de los manejos, los aspectos disciplinarios. Bueno, la campaña y la situación en lo que son las bases o en un periodo de paz marca diferencias en la actitud. Pero lo que sí siempre está enfatizado es esta situación de que los soldados deben ver que hay un control de su accionar por parte de los jefes militares. Después, bueno, acá es interesante porque en la primera parte del libro 8 hay muchas más referencias a lo que son el temor a los desertores propios y en otros libros de la obra. Pero aquí lo que había para esta categoría era más cómo aprovechar las deserciones del enemigo. O sea, este apartado, bueno, lo elegí para esta sesión porque marca también la dificultad muchas veces de estos pensamientos, de estas reflexiones tan cortas, de categorizarlas, porque pensemos que puede ser también una referencia al tratamiento de los enemigos. Hay mucho que es muy difícil decidir qué es más importante en lo que era la propuesta del autor. Bueno, rebeliones, fíjense, respecto a las rebeliones es la desconfianza en esta política de conflicto permanente en múltiples frentes del imperio. Esto del aliado de hoy es el enemigo de mañana, y la prudencia para manejar a estos federati o otros grupos bajo líderes étnicos extranjeros o no étnicamente romanos. Diplomacia, ya estamos terminando, pero de nuevo, la premura siempre por obtener la paz cuando sea posible y no extender las operaciones militares que son costosas, implican un riesgo creciente para el Estado. El enemigo, esto también estaba enunciado al principio, esta situación de que un conocimiento técnico de las particularidades de cada pueblo, dónde enfrentar a cada uno y dónde no. O sea, esto está en otros apartados con más detalle, pero es una preocupación permanente, la adaptación de la configuración de la estrategia, de las disposiciones bélicas respecto de quién es el que está de enfrente. Manejo de la información, este es otro elemento que denota la consistencia organizativa de este Estado romano y de este ejército tardo romano, proto-bizantino, si quieren. Esta situación de toda la cadena de información, contraseñas y manejo de información para garantizar el secreto de los planes de batalla y la transformación de los mismos en caso de identificar alguna filtración. Bueno, para ir terminando. Fíjense, de nuevo, en las diferentes categorías está esta preocupación de evitar la batalla siempre que sea posible. La sabiduría del comandante es evitar la batalla, no ganar la batalla. Evitar el conflicto, conservar las fuerzas propias. Y para terminar con este recorrido por esta propuesta de clasificación, hacer un breve comentario terminando con esta de, fíjense, los errores en la guerra causan un daño que es mucho más permanente en el tiempo que los que se dan en la situación de paz. Para ir cerrando, lo que vemos entonces aquí es que la existencia de un público lector, estos jefes militares, pensemos en los duques, en las unidades de la Guardia Imperial, no es solo el generalato o los estrategos los que van a acceder a estos textos, son siempre, esta literatura técnica, un fenómeno mayormente constantinopolitano. O sea, se copian en la capital. Pero se puede considerar que existe un público, los generales, existe una tradición que se ha ido transformando a las necesidades, y que están las bases para ¿qué? Para lo que va a ser el periodo posterior. Va a haber, como todos sabemos, un apagón en lo que es la paideia de la antigüedad con las conmociones del siglo VII, las interrupciones en la labor de los cronistas e historiógrafos, la emergencia de literatura apocalíptica, pero van a estar dadas las bases y se van a conservar estos textos para que durante el Renacimiento macedónico haya ya un auge mucho más marcado de este tipo de literatura, ya asociado a lo que va a ser el Renacimiento macedónico y la reconquista de los territorios a partir de el ascenso de la dinastía macedónica. Bueno, me parece que esto ha sido suficiente, les agradezco el espacio y los saludo.
Thank you, Ivan Ray. Thank you. Now I'm gonna call Professor Lyubov Kostogrizova. She's from the Ural State Law University in Russia. And her communication is entitled The Principle of Symphony of Powers in Byzantium, the Source, Features, and Effects. Professor, здравствуйте.
Hello.
Hello.
I can share screen, yes. Okay. Can you see my presentation?
No, not yet.
Can you see it?
No.
No?
No.
Excuse me, what can I do?
Yes, you have to go to share, the share button, share screen.
Oh, sorry.
Then your entire screen.
No, I can't do it. Share.
Maybe it's some
Share screen, yes.
Share screen.
Screen.
Then select your entire screen.
Share screen,
like
yes.
That. Yeah, and then you select your entire screen, something like that. And
can
then
you see?
Share.
No.
No.
Oh, okay. It's
Let
problem.
me try to show you. No, I can't do that. Okay, but after you go to share screen, what does appear to you on a screen?
No, I can't.
Okay. Do you want to send to me by email and then I can show for you?
Yes, I try. Yes.
Okay, you can send to that official email we had.
I'm sorry for my problems.
It's okay.
Oh, I can't find it now.
Okay.
Oh, it's a pity. So maybe I can speak without presentation. Can I?
Okay, if it's okay for you.
Okay, maybe I can do it, but it's a pity. But I try to do it. Thank you very much for your invitation for this Congress. Hello, everyone, and glad to see all of you. I'm professor of Ioannina State Law University. I teach legal history, and my scientific interest is the Byzantine law, and now I can tell you about the principle of symphony of powers of Byzantine, the source, features, and effects. I'm sorry for absence of presentation, but I tried to share you this presentation after maybe my speech. But now I can tell you that in spite of appearance in 313 of Milan Edict, where Christianity was received equal rights with other religions, it was recognized as official religion only in 318 by Edict Cunctus Populus of Theodosia I. Since Constantine the Great, Christian Church played a very important role in the Byzantine life, but there was no ideas about the church and state relations. So far as the church became bigger organization, it demanded more attention. And we know that Emperor Justinian wanted to restore the great Roman Empire in borders of 1st, 2nd centuries. He succeeded in it, but there were many religious problems in the empire, and Justinian wanted to be beyond any religious fight. He considered that emperor has to embody the unity of empire. That's why he displaced the emperor from participation in the religious fight. So he divided some authorities between the priesthood, Hierociny, and the kingdom, Basileia, in the famous preface for his 6th novel. In particular, he said that the priesthood and the kingdom are the two greatest gifts of God. Both of them arose from one source, and if the kingdom takes care of human matters and the emperor has to think about the affairs of state, the constant harmony, symphonia, will be between both the kingdom and the priesthood. So the priesthood embodies spiritual sphere, and the kingdom embodies material sphere. I consider that Justinian underlined this equality between emperor and patriarch. So, when the emperor has to think about the affairs of state, especially about keeping peace in the united empire, the patriarch has to serve for God's matters and has to keep peace in church. So the figure of emperor was exonerated from fault for church dissension. Many scholars consider that Leo III, in his Ecloga, in 741, destroyed the principle of symphony, because he said that he's shepherd of people like the Apostle Peter. Therefore, he had to rule with help of laws and justice. So the emperor is main figure in empire. But I think that there is no controversy here, and I agree with Dieter Simon when he says that, unlike Justinian, Leo III wanted to restrict himself to dealing only with the most necessary aspects, but not with all matters. So the principle of symphony was preserved. The Panagoga in 19th century was the law code which tried to summarize the new legal situation after the Arab conquest of Syria, Palestine, Lebanon, Egypt, and the rest of North Africa, and after the end of iconoclast controversy. Here we can find new formulation of the doctrine of symphonia. Since society is formed by parts and elements in a similar way to man, the most important and necessary part are emperor and the patriarch. Therefore, also the peace and happiness in soul and body of the empire and priesthood are the concord and agreement, symphonia in the everything. Many scholars consider that the main problem is that a panagoga or isagoga was never issued. They say that Patriarch Photios wanted to show the equality of church and state and to reinforce his position by such a way. But I think that ideas of a panagoga lived in Byzantium for a long time. We can't see these ideas in Basilica of Leo VI, but we can see them in canons, such as Canon and 14th titles in 12th centuries, and Syntagma of Matvei Vlasteris in 14th century. I agree with that researchers who say that the principle of symphony was ideal. But we can see the appearance of this principle in different spheres during all history of Byzantium. Russian scientist of 9th century Skobelanovich said about church's influence on all spheres of life, Byzantine life. I have to say about legislative sphere. This problem was very actual for Christians, because they didn't want to violate laws and canons. They preferred to follow canons. That's why Constantinos II declared at the Council of Milan in 355, anything that I want, it's a canon. But Emperors Valentinian and Marcian in 451 issued a constitution according to which all laws issued in violation of the canons of the Church are declared invalid. In 513, the Emperor Justinian declared that divine canons have no less force than laws. He said in 545, in his 131st novella, that he ordains that the canons of the Holy Church, which were enacted or confirmed by the four holy councils, that is to say, of Nicaea, Ephesus, Chalcedon, shall have the force of law. They accept the dogmas of the aforesaid four holy councils as divine scriptures and uphold these canons as laws. Leo VI said in his Basilica about harmonization between laws and canons. Also, he wrote that the civil law takes precedence over the church law in civil matters, and canons and church laws take precedence in church matters. Theodore Valsamon in his Nomocanon and Matvei Vlasteris in his Syntagma in 14th centuries had written that good laws made to complete canons. Also, we can see church and state cooperation in judicial sphere. So, all criminals had to receive secular penalties and church punishments, anathemas or epitemias, and the apogee of the interaction of the state and church in the judicial sphere was the creation in 14th centuries in Constantinople of a special department, the dicasterion, which included 12 judges. They judged only civil cases. This court became the highest court of appeal. Soon, ecumenical judges appeared in all the cities of the empire and operated until the fall of Byzantium. Due to principal symphony, many Christians in other countries could receive help from Byzantine emperor because they were included in Byzantine Commonwealth. The Orthodox oikumena is a union of Christians living in different states. They wanted to achieve salvation, and the main task of church or ecumenical patriarch was to help them in it. That's why some countries became allies of Byzantine in foreign policy. Justinian tried to follow his model of the symphony in his legacy, and due to him, Caesar papism in Byzantium de jure became impossible, but de facto, powerful emperors always tended to control all matters, including ecclesiastical life. Weak emperors were to be controlled by Constantinople patriarchs, and vice emperors tended to follow the model of the symphony. The existence of the principle of symphony of powers in Byzantium guaranteed, firstly, the restriction of the autocracy of the basileus, because a frequent reason for the overthrow of the ruler was the accusation in autocracy and despotism. Secondly, it guaranteed the stability of existence for the church and patriarch. And thirdly, it gave the preservation of unity in the state. Finally, the principle of the symphony of authorities held together the people who were part of the Orthodox oikumena. In conclusion, I want to say some of my notes about the principle of symphony. The main task of empire was to receive support of God. So Romans obeyed him and performed all ritual of church, because the Christian church was the mediator between God and people by their opinion. So the church organization wasn't a brick in the building of Byzantine Empire. It included almost all citizens of the state, and the symphony of powers had to realize the above-mentioned main task, because the church was responsible for spiritual life, and the emperor was responsible for material goods. After the decline of Byzantine Empire, the situation was different, because not all citizens, but only part of them were Christians. So the principle of symphony of powers wasn't actually already. Maybe there was the same situation like Byzantium in other countries, including Russia, but it was only for a short time. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm sorry for my English, and I'm sorry for the absence of presentation, and glad to hear your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Your English was perfect, way better than mine. Well, Professor, actually, Carlos Martins Carrasco, from the Centro de Estudios Bizantinos, Neogregos e Chipriotas, and from the University of Cordoba, was not able to participate live in this session. So I'm going to show a video he sent to us of his presentation, if that's okay for everybody. Just a minute.
Quiero comenzar dando las gracias a los organizadores de este congreso por el trabajo tan extraordinario que están haciendo de coordinarnos a tanto, de tan diversas procedencias y con temas tan variados. Y en segundo lugar, pues, quiero también pedir disculpas por el modo en el que voy a presentar esta comunicación, pero bueno, cuestiones de cambio de horario y demás, pues me hacen imposible estar en dos sitios al mismo tiempo. Y bueno, creo que era esta la mejor opción de cumplir con precisamente con el trabajo de los organizadores que han contado conmigo, y bueno, por no dejar tampoco el hueco vacío que descoloque la acción. Bueno, sin más, voy a comenzar con esta comunicación titulada Heraclio y la talasocracia bizantina. En los terrenos de la iglesia rusa de Santa María Magdalena, la Jerusalén actual, se encuentran algunos vestigios que permiten dotar de fondo humano a lo que no sería sino una fría sucesión de hechos, reinados y batallas. La antigua necrópolis del Dominus Flevit, cerca de la iglesia de la Agonía en el Monte de los Olivos, entre varias inscripciones funerarias sobre Tiki, Diaferusa, Mama Caditano, que Tontecnon, es decir, la tumba perteneciente a Mamas de Cádiz y su hijo, con el preceptivo yotacismo propio del griego de finales del siglo VI y comienzos del VII. Este hombre, procedente del extremo occidental del Mediterráneo, habría emprendido la peregrinación a la Jerusalén a la ciudad santa de Jerusalén para encontrar la muerte en ella, quizás junto a su hijo, aunque lo más probable sea que Mama invirtiera parte de sus ganancias en una sepultura para él y sus descendientes en un lugar sagrado. Pertenecería a esa casta de comerciantes que querrían hacerse perdonar su enriquecimiento. Ya se sabe, era más fácil que un camello pasara por el ojo de una aguja que no que un rico entrara en el reino de los cielos.
Okay, I think I'm online. Sorry for it. The file was too heavy, so we have to cancel it. But we're gonna invite Professor Carlos for another opportunity, another seminar to present his communication. I'm really sorry. So we can go to the question session right now. I'm gonna put everyone in the screen. Okay.
Do I finally appear?
Okay.
Good, thank you.
We didn't receive a lot of questions, but we have one to Professor Ivan. It's from Tiago Cardoso. He's asking if you can see some influence of the Avars or other people military practice in the Mauritius Strategicum. Professor, your microphone is muted. I'm sorry.
Yes, indeed, there is proof of a conscious from the author of the book about the impact of the entering of the Avars in the Balkans. The book number 11 has serial strategies and tips, if you let me, about how to fight every one of the enemies of the empire. So in that book about the Avars tells it's the same of all the peoples of the migration period: mobility, difficulty of reach durable agreements, and so. So the present is remarkable and appears in other books as well, but de forma muy marcada, el énfasis, perdónenme para hacerlo en español, es muy marcado la presencia y el impacto. Podríamos hablar del texto de Chris Wickham cuando hace 3 clasificaciones de los pueblos de el periodo, y bueno, estas poblaciones con las cuales no se puede llegar a un acuerdo. La guerra con los sasánidas está formalizada, pero en cambio con estos pueblos es muy mutable. Bueno, creo que ya ha sido demasiado esto. Gracias por la pregunta.
Obrigado, professor. I have a question for Ives, so I'm gonna do it in Portuguese. Ives, esse tema seu sobre, você chegou a falar sobre o massacre dos latinos, esse é um ponto, né, histórico que me interessa bastante. Eu queria saber se você tem alguma opinião sobre, se você acredita que o massacre ocorreu devido a, de fato, um sentimento popular em relação aos ocidentais, ou se as representações muito negativas sobre os ocidentais, na sua visão, se elas são algo simplesmente limitado às fontes escritas que nós temos, que são escritas pela elite bizantina. Você tem alguma opinião quanto a isso? Você acredita que foi uma expressão de um ódio popular em relação aos latinos ou não? Essa questão do ódio em relação a eles é algo que somente aparece nas fontes por conta de um processo de barbarização através de uma tópica clássica.
Então,
Obrigado.
espero que possam me ouvir melhor
agora. Eu acredito que sim, Guilherme. Até toda a historiografia que eu tive acesso.
E, claro, a fonte do Guilherme de Tiro, ele tem o seu viés, ele é muito pró-latino, ele tem uma visão um tanto negativa dos gregos, principalmente diante desse episódio, mas eu acredito que,
só um
de
minuto.
fato...
O seu som ficou muito baixo de novo. Você pode falar? Perdão. Se você puder falar bem na frente do microfone.
Um momento. E agora, estou ouvindo melhor?
Agora tá ótimo.
Sem o microfone foi melhor que com o microfone. Então, vamos lá. Eu acredito que sim, para responder sua pergunta, de fato, havia um sentimento popular que era anti-latino. Eu acho que as diferenças de credo, prática litúrgica, influenciaram muito nisso. Eu acredito que a herança da Primeira Cruzada, os ataques que fizeram a territórios bizantinos, a preponderância que os mercadores latinos tinham em muitos momentos, dominando o comércio bizantino, os venezianos chegaram a ter uma quase que independência em seu distrito em um certo período. E acredito que sim. Acho que, de fato, existe um elemento literário, existe aquele topo dos bárbaros ocidentais que não entendem a cultura grega, acho que sim, mas que essa reação, como aconteceu em 1182, ela não teria ocorrido de tal maneira se fosse apenas um sentimento daquela elite intelectual, dos historiadores, dos literatos. Acho que, de fato, havia muito incitado pela igreja ortodoxa grega, esse sentimento anti-latino mesmo.
Certo. Muito obrigado. I have a question for Professor. Just a minute. Professor Lyubov. The idea of a symphony of powers is something very well established in the field of Byzantine studies. But in the last years, we had some new propositions to think the relationship between the emperor, the church, and the people. And I'm speaking mainly of Anthony Caldelli's The Byzantine Republic. Do you have any opinion about that? How do you see this permanence of a republican idea in Bizâncio, and how do you think this is connected to a symphony of powers? Thank you. Your microphone is muted.
Yes, thank you very much for your question. I understand your question because I know the monography of Anthony Caldellis about Byzantine republics, and I think that you have in mind in this monography. Yes, I think that many researchers say about symphony, but they underlined that the symphony was declined to theocracy or to Caesar papism, maybe. So emperor was more than patriarch. But Caldelis say that emperor was not so big figure in Byzantium, because his power wasn't very maybe large, because there were senate or people who want to also take power. And the main idea of Caldelis is the people have more power in Byzantine than emperor, because many emperors was overthrown after their throne, and it was his idea that God ruled by empire, and it was God opinion who can be emperor. So good emperor help to patriarch to preserve the power and maybe to preserve the peace in empire, peace in state. And the main my idea is that the principle of symphony was in legal tradition of Byzantium, and it was ideal, and it was the principle was the state principle of Byzantium. So I think that no confrontation idea of Byzantine Republic and principle symphony, because it's good for state, its existence. I'm sorry for my poor English. Okay.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
Mm-hmm. I think that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Do you guys have a question for each other, or? No? Okay. So I think we can close this session. Thank you very much. And on behalf of the Mediterranean and Byzantine Lab from the Federal University of São Paulo, I thank you all. All of your presence was very important to our conference. And that's it. Thank you. And
thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Glad to meet you again. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Obrigado a todos.
До свидания.
Até a próxima.